Good morning. Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak on Citizen Television. Thank you for staying with us. The hashtag on Twitter is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. With me in studio is Irungu Houghton, the Executive Director of Amnesty International. Irungu, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
And many thanks for gracing us. A lot happened on Monday and on Thursday, and the front pages of the publications are a reflection of the events which yesterday engulfed the protests here in Nairobi and also other parts of the country. The Daily Nation says outrage, assault on media professionals. 6 journalists were seriously injured in yesterday's protests in Nairobi and elsewhere. The Insanity, says the paper, continued on the third day of the anti-government protest led by the Azimio leadership and Raila Odinga, to be specific, with media professionals bearing the brunt of police brutality. Several people were also injured, businesses looted, and property of unknown value destroyed as the protest degenerated into chaos. The Americans are concerned, so is President William Ruto, who says that is committed to respect the Constitution and uphold the rule of law as businesses continue to count loss because of the protests. And at this juncture, Irungu, what needs to happen to restore sanity because of the concerns that are growing over the protests?
I mean, I think what we've got on our headlines today, and of course what was running through the media yesterday is really I guess I'm even losing words to say it, but it has been a disaster. In many ways, we've just had the three episodes or 3 occasions of Maandamano, and already we're in a situation where it's beginning to look like 2017 again. And just to remind ourselves again, 2017 saw up to 205 cases of sexual and gender-based violence. We saw almost 100 people, shot and buried just in protests just like this. And it seems unfortunate that the playbook that was used in 2017 has returned to 2023. And I think we have to be very concerned, and we have to be very vigilant and press for a different playbook in terms of public order management and also public safety management.
Mm-hmm. And when you talk about public order management, here again, the concern is how the police handled the protesters and how the protesters behaved in the midst of protest. Of course, there were lootings, destructions of property, vandalization of shops and supermarkets in many parts of the country. What will it take then for the leadership of the country to understand that there's need for a coming together for political stability? Look at the Americans. They're saying that there's need for a dialogue, and Chris Coons met both Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua and the opposition leader. The international community through the African Union also is concerned about the situation in Kenya. I mean, how can we best address these deja vu events that often engulf our electoral cycle?
Yeah, unfortunately, many of us thought last year that we had skipped the that part of the elections called the post-election violence. It seemed, as we know, elections are probably the most violent part of our history, political history. What we didn't know is it was just buffering, right? And 6 months later, we are now going through what has to be called post-election violence. But of course, it is complicated by the struggle that people are experiencing around living costs. But I think, let's just look at the impact a little bit. I mean, since the third Maandamano that took place yesterday, yes. Mm-hmm. We've seen, scores of people, tens of people injured. We've seen several funerals now. Of course, the first to fall was that Maseno University student, William Mayange. But we've also seen tremendous damage to not just Nairobi, but, and I think this is where we have to be careful with Kenya Kwanza, because yesterday we heard them saying that, it is only happening in a few places. Let's be clear that we've seen violence and mayhem and looting, not just in Nairobi, but we've seen it in at least 4 or 5 counties now. And the concern really is that every time we have disruption, let's just take Nairobi as a starting point. Nairobi is responsible for about 60% plus of our gross domestic product. It's, of course, the seat of it's the capital of the nation and the seat of the national government. Conservatively, we're probably losing about 2 to 3 billion shillings every day that we have Maandamanos managed this way. And if conservatively, that comes to about 9 billion. And we hear from the Nairobi Stock Exchange that we probably had capital flight of about 8 billion last week. We are hurting economically. I mean, this is just not something that can be sustained in the context of the challenges we've got. And I think the last thing really is that yesterday was a very traumatic day, I think, in many ways, but it was also quite ironic because here you had a very well coordinated international finance and commercial event with the American Chamber of Commerce meeting. The president jetted back into the country. He narrowly missed joining the protest as he drew from the airport. But the concern is you have all this energy going into building greater trade and commercial relationships, and less than 15 minutes away, you have probably the most tear gas we've seen since 2008 or maybe 2017.
Okay, and on that, the concern is that one of the country's economic channels has been severely affected. A cruise ship destined for the port of Mombasa docked in Dar es Salaam from Seychelles, that is in Tanzania, docked in Dar es Salaam for 6 days because of the concerns in the country. Honorable Martha Wangari, MP Gilgil, thank you for your time and good morning.
Good morning, Ayub. Good
thank
morning,
you so much.
Irongo. Good to see you again.
Thanks for making time.
Thank you.
What's your account of what's happening at the moment? Isn't it concerning that there seems to be no heeding ear of the calls for dialogue to arrest the current state of affairs in the country?
First of all, Ayub, allow me to say hi to everyone who is watching. I've not been here in quite some time. And, sir, yesterday, or the day before yesterday, I was telling some group of parliamentarians that when we are creating man-made mayhem, I was dealing with a current issue in my constituency, a humanitarian issue, where we had flash floods, we've lost 4 children, we've lost 3 adults, and we were dealing with an issue that is, nature-driven. But on this other end, we are actually creating the mayhem in terms of destabilizing the country and causing chaos. And I think it is quite worrying, and I agree with Irongo that economically we are hurting. That is for sure, because we are already loading something more on what the Kenyans were already going through. But I think for me, and people say 2 wrongs don't make a right when you speak of dialogue, but I don't think any one wrong makes a right. And I think I wish we can be patriotic enough that whenever we go through an election, I have gone through election twice, 2017, and I've done it 2022. This last election, I beat my opponent with over 16,000. And the same thing with the presidential vote. We went to a vote. It was peaceful. Right. And I don't think there has been a peaceful election like that. We went to Bomas. It was peaceful. And more importantly, we went to court. And people argued their cases. People argued on the other side. And the court made its ruling. In 2017, the same powers where I was in Jubilee government, we did not agree with the Supreme Court ruling because it actually annulled an election, a presidential election, and we went back to election. So I think we also must get to a point, even when we call out the chaos, because at the end of the day, the people hurting are not the people who stay in Runda, they are not people who stay in Karen, they are not people who stay in Milimani, in Nakuru. Okay. The people hurting are the people who stay in Mathare, stay in Kibra, people who stay in Pipeline Estate or are just minding their businesses, people who have put their businesses in Kisumu that were vandalized. I mean, it's national anarchy. It is actually almost post-election violence, if you ask me.
Okay, but when people come out, when there's such a mammoth crowd of people who come and embrace your protest, does it not point to a failure within the establishment, the country's policymakers and the politicians in this case? I'm talking about the echelon who have been tasked with making policies to help Kenyans have better lives. Isn't it a pointer to unemployment, the increasing cases of young people who are sidelined when it comes to opportunities in government? How then can this be best addressed? Because it isn't an opposition affair. It is an affair that concerns Kenyans, and policymakers aren't even worried.
By the way, I'm agreeing with you. In terms, are there issues? Of course there are issues. Because we are talking people who are not able to pay for school fees. I mean, I'm struggling to even help parents to raise fees for JSS, to raise fees for high school. So in terms of issues, we are in agreement. By the way, we are on the same side because we also live in this country. Okay. We don't live in utopia, whether you're in the majority or you're in the minority. But is it the best way to go about it? If you ask me, I would say it's not the best way to go about it. Okay. And I also agree that I have heard even our deputy president say, we are willing to talk, but not on entry to government. Okay. He has said exactly that because I think there must come to a point where we agree that even if I wanted to organize demos against you today, Ayub, and I'm saying that as a practicing politician, it's not so hard. Because we know how it is done. We have been there. So even getting these numbers that you see and the people following, and it will always happen, and you're able to do it. But the sad thing is that out of demonstrations, they end up being violent. That is one. If you look at yesterday's footage, which you aired very well.
Okay.
There were people who had even closed their shops. They were looted to the, to the ground. We have, even Governor Nyong'o had seen, I think, foresight of what would happen in Kisumu and had tried to actually ban the demonstrations, because out of these demonstrations, you're not sure who will come along. Sometimes you'll have the thugs come in, you'll have people who are willing to just pay for, for blood, and at the end of the day, cause anarchy. So you will always have the elements, whether it is organized by the pro or the against. At the end of the day, demos will not help this country. I would tell you that for sure.
Thank you.
Whether it is organized by government side or organized by opposition. And the people who suffer are actually the people who should be assisted. The moment they are closing their business, when I saw that young man in Maseno who was killed, that blood is on somebody. Because we wouldn't be here if it wasn't, the demos on the street.
Thank you. The chairperson of the Center for Multi-Party Democracy, former Nyeri County Woman MP, Priscilla Nyokafi. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for your time and company.
Thank you, and good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Okay. A lot seems to be happening, and the worry is not only domestic, but also there are concerns among members of the international community. What is the easy, immediate fix to what we're experiencing at the moment?
Yeah, I think it is true that the international community is concerned. And not just that it is concerned, it is true that many economies are going through what Kenya is going through. I think this cost of living is not a Kenyan problem, it is an international problem. And so that concern by internationals is also real. For the CMD, and we have a discussion today, we have looked at what political parties have done in the past, because CMD is a political party space. And this is the story of 92. This is the story of 97. This is 2002. This is 2007. This is 2013. This is 2017. And you can see the legal steps that we have made in between there. 1990, we did 2A. 1997, we did IPPG. 2005, we attempted the first draft constitution. 2010, we had the first constitution. And so maybe it is time to look at some fundamental questions that have been part of our political history. And you can't look at those fundamental questions without a dialogue. So it actually does mean that the time has come for us to review, for us to look at some of these matters. And in terms of the economies, politics and the economy are two sides of the same coin. Once you get it wrong on politics, your economy is going to suffer. And we are in that exact situation. So what are we going to do to our politics so that it can fix our economy? And what is the sort of conversation? What are the sort of issues? What are those cost of living issues? And I was even happy to wear my SDGs badge, because in CMD, SDGs are very important for us. Health, water, education. So, but you can't have those things when you have the chaos that we are seeing. There must be a certain level of stability that allows you to talk about the issues that are then bringing in the sort of chaos that we are seeing in the streets.
But Chairperson, three main pillars that you have mentioned: health, education, and water. I mean, accessibility to clean drinking water is still not attained as per the United Nations goals. You look at education, schools have been severely affected by the ongoing demonstrations. NAT is concerned because of what's happening. And you look at health, still we are not universally covered, and that's what the government aims. All these three have been dotting the country's policy-making processes since independence. Why are we not suddenly getting these goals right? Where does the problem lie?
We have problems at different levels, and I think it is also important to say that we have made progress. We have made progress on some of them. The only problem is that the policy making that you require for these matters is the sort of policy making that requires a bipartisan approach. It actually requires the ideas that the president has, and the ideas that the opposition leader has, and the idea that the opposition parties have. And so that's the thing. How do we have a bipartisan conversation on water, a bipartisan conversation, even on food security? I'm very worried because now the rains have come and the fertilizer has not come. So we had a good answer to the food crisis. And food, cost of living is one of the things that is propelling this. And so some of the demonstrators are not on the electoral justice matters. It is because cost of living is really pressing. And we can't have a conversation on cost of living if we keep saying, you won, you lost. We must have a cost of living debate that says, what do we do with inflation? What do we do quickly? And you asked very quickly, like now we quickly need to deliver fertilizer. Even amidst all these chaos, we need to find how fertilizer is going to get to the farmers because the rains have come. That conversation is a bipartisan conversation, is a conversation that is calm, is a policy conversation. Are subsidies good? Are subsidies not good? That conversation requires politics to be calm enough. Okay. And so that's what we're calling for today. Can we de-escalate? We need to quickly de-escalate the political situation, because the way the political situation is going, any further escalation is only going to take us down a cliff. Okay,
we'll talk about Irungu when we get back from the break. The public angst and anguish about the cost of living crisis, unemployment, corruption, and what are of concerns to the Kenyan public with no regard for political party affiliation, because the common denominator is that what affects the farmer in Nyeri County affects the fisherman in the county of Kisumu or elsewhere across the coastline, or the pastoralist community in Northern Frontier districts. You're watching Daybreak on Citizen Television. The hashtag on Twitter is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. When we get back from the break, we proceed with Martha Wangari, Irungo Houghton and Priscilla Nyokafi here on the broadcast. Stay tuned.